Hello, people. Last night I finished a book, The Riddle of the Labyrinth, subtitled The Quest to Crack an Ancient Code. This was really interesting. This was about, fuck, cat's out there meowing its ass off. It's about these tablets that they found on Crete. Uh, it's called Linear B. There's Linear A also. I've read about it before, but I never read about these people that were trying to crack the code. It's pretty cool. It's really, they call it the first European language. I don't know what the fuck that cat's doing. I might have to stop and get that cat. But very interesting. This book came out of my unread pile. My pile, I'm chipping away at that fucking pile. I may get half of them done before the lockdown is over. The book concentrates on three people. There's the guy named Evans. He's the one that found it. This is the Palace of Gnosis. It's pronounced Gnosis here in the United States. It's pronounced Kenosis in in the UK, and it's actually spelled Knossos, and the last O is pronounced like an I. I don't know. I had to Google that to figure out how to pronounce it. I really enjoyed this book. Starts out with Evans, the guy that dug the stuff up. Evans is kind of an oddball. He ends up rebuilding the palace. Nobody knows whether he rebuilt it correctly or not. In those days, I don't know what it was. It was the early 1900s that he did this. In those days, it was kind of slash and burn archaeology. Schliemann did the same thing, only much, much worse at Troy. It then goes to a woman, her name is Kober, Alice Kober, and I found her to be the most interesting out of the bunch. She was an oddball too. She was a very bright woman. She was a professor and very accomplished, and she just loved ancient languages. So that's what she studied. And when she found out about these tablets, that not only did they not know what they said, but they didn't know what language they were written in. So when you're trying to decode something, that's the worst possible case. Sometimes they know what the language was, but they don't understand the writing. Sometimes they understand the writing, but they don't know what the language was. The Egyptian hieroglyphics are kind of the same example, only they found the Rosetta Stone, and the Rosetta Stone had one sentence in Greek, and then it had another sentence in Egyptian, the exact same sentences. So, boom, they had the thing about figured out for them. Then it goes to a guy named Ventress. And Ventress is kind of a sad character. Another brilliant young man. The guy, I thought it was incredible that he had learned all these languages. The guy was reading at the age of 2, and then he learned all these languages. But then the author points out that when you're young, your brain is predisposed to learn languages. I don't know why that never occurred to me. Maybe I hadn't thought about it at all. It's when you're older, like me, that you can't learn a language. Let's get to my notes. This is about Evans. He was a very short man. I have Evans the Digger written down here. That's Digger with a D. He had laborers from Crete that worked for him, and the Cretan laborers drank wine made from fermented raisins. Evans turned his nose up at that, and he imported his wine. he wore a suit everywhere. Even in the middle of the Mediterranean summer, he wore a suit. That's all I got written about Evans. He was very stubborn. He refused to publish pictures or diagrams of any of the writing for a long, long time. He rebuilt the palace, used fucking concrete to do it. Then I go to Kober. Kober is the detective. And I have read the Kober quote on page 86. These fucking page numbers in here. Even in the light of my bedroom where I read, they were hard to... Okay, here we go. On every kind of writing material known to man, on paper, parchment, papyrus, palm leaves, wood, clay, brick, or stone, on every kind of metal there exist inscriptions which cannot be read. Sometimes they cannot be read because the system of writing is unknown, and sometimes because although we know what sounds to ascribe to the different signs, the language is unknown. These documents range in date all the way from Neolithic times to the present. Some are probably in the process of being written at this very moment. Those, however, that were written at periods which we may call the fringes of history are especially important for the light that they may cast on the past. And the cat has just come in the garage, so that's very nice. I was just worried about what that fucking cat was doing. I know I got more stuff to read here. Top of page 106. Kober was very... I did a thing years ago where I used to use all these numbers to figure out the effectiveness of the different NHL teams. And one of the guys at work said to me one time, he said, "What the fuck are you doing?" He says, "Do you know that none of us can figure out what all these little scribblings you got going there?" Kober was like that. Before her death, Kober would cut and annotate more than 116,600 2x3-inch slips, as well as more than 63,300 larger slips. Some 180,000 cards in all. The smaller ones she fitted neatly together into empty cigarette cartons. And they have a picture of her cigarette cartons. She was like a chain smoker. The one paper product of which she appeared to have no short supply. Even now, more than 6 decades later, to open one of them is to be met with the faint whiff of mid-century tobacco. Fleetwood Imperials, a cleaner, finer smoke, her ersatz file cabinets say. Herbert Terryton, there's something about them you'll like. Kober was like, the whole thing takes place during World War II. The last guy, Ventris, he was actually an RAF pilot for a little while. Okay, we gotta go to here. Top 2 paragraphs, page 108. After calculating her figures, Kober used a dime store hand punch, made holes in precisely determined spots on her card. Each spot stood for a particular linear B character. There was a design spot for, and then they have a symbol written there, for instance, another for, and so on. The location of each character's hole remained constant from card to card. In this way, by stacking 2 or more cards together, Kober could see which holes aligned. That told her instantly which characters those words had in common. Making all these files takes time, and the files have considerable bulk, she wrote in 1947. But once they are finished, all the material is so arranged that anything, no matter how unexpected, can be checked in a few minutes. What she had created in pure analog form was a database, with the punched holes marking the perimeters on which the data could be sorted. For all of their rigor and precision, the file boxes also reveal a gentler side to Alice Kober. As Thomas Palema and his colleague Susan Trombley have written, on one occasion they note Kober took extra care in cutting a greeting card used as a tab divider, perfectly centering a fawn lying in a bed of flowers. There was a paper shortage while this was going on. There was shortages of all kinds of stuff during the Second World War, paper, ink, all that stuff. So she used scrap paper to do this. She'd sit there at her dining room table and do this, smoking one cigarette after another. Alice Kober dies early. She has a stomach cancer type thing. She dies before she figures it out, but she does figure out a lot of things. She figures out some names. She figures out that the word at the bottom of all of these tablets means total. She also figures out that the language uses inflection, which means it has ing at the end, eds. It may not seem like a big deal, but they could figure out a lot just from that. And so Ventress comes along and kind of stands on the shoulders of Kober, and he solves it. Ventress is a very oddball guy, and his parents were very oddball too. His father dies very young of tuberculosis. His mother commits suicide. His parents they raised him according to what Carl Jung wrote, and they limited who could touch him when he was a kid. He had a very odd upbringing. I just have one thing marked here for Ventress, page 205. Again, I'm having a hard time even seeing these page numbers. Second paragraph. If Linear B exerted a greater hold on Ventress than it did on anyone else, there was ample cause. In his youth, it was a buffer against an unnaturally frigid upbringing. Soon afterward, it became a distraction from great loss. Both his parents had died, one by suicide, by the time he was 18. Later, when he was a young architect, it helped leaven his days in an uninspiring job. Ignoring his wife and children and eventually his profession, he worked feverishly on the script at every available moment. By the time he was in his mid-30s, his obsession had cost him his relations with his family, his architectural career, and in the view of some observers, his life. I think he committed suicide. A lot of people in his family included say, no, he had a heart attack at the wheel. He was driving at high rate of speed, pulled into a rest stop, never slowed down, and slammed into a truck. I don't know, it's sad. Kober was sad, too, that she died that young. It was a great big deal when this was solved for archaeologists all around the world. Everybody, a specific set of people were very aware that this was going on. It took 50 years to decode these things. Everybody assumed that the language was some kind of bizarre thing. The language was actually Greek. And once they figured out it was Greek, Ventress was able to figure out what were place names, assign, sounds to these characters, and he figured it out. I would have never been able to do it. These were brilliant people. I kind of love this book. I'm already started on another one, and thank you for watching.